There I sat, on my perfectly acceptable, utterly inoffensive porch, sipping a lukewarm coffee, basking in the glow of what I genuinely believed was peak suburban bliss. My gaze drifted across my small patch of front yard, landing with a soft, contented thud on the object of my affection. A rectangular, woven outdoor rug. It was a tasteful shade of muted charcoal, subtly textured, and if I do say so myself, it added a certain je ne sais quoi to the entrance of my humble abode. "Mac," I'd told myself when I bought it, "you've finally achieved aesthetic maturity." Little did I know, that rug was about to become the Waterloo of my quiet existence, the spark that ignited a war hotter than a Georgia sidewalk in July. You see, I live in Sunnyside Estates, a name that conjures images of manicured lawns, chirping birds, and neighbors exchanging freshly baked pies. The reality is more like a carefully curated diorama, where individual expression goes to die a slow, agonizing death by committee. We have an HOA, of course, a homeowners association. And not just any HOA, but the HOA. The kind that has an annual budget larger than some small nations, and a rule book thicker than a medieval tome, written in a font so tiny it practically requires a magnifying glass and a law degree to decipher. I'd always considered myself a model citizen of Sunnyside Estates. My lawn was mowed to the exact blade height mandated by Section 3B, Subsection C, Paragraph 4, Clause 2, or so I assumed. I just told my landscaper to make it look HOA approved. My trash cans were discreetly hidden. My holiday decorations were removed precisely 48 hours after the official end of the festive season. I was a cog in the machine, a brick in the wall, a perfectly beige, unnoticeable resident. The rug, I reasoned, was a subtle upgrade, a whisper of personality in a sea of conformity. It wasn't neon pink. It didn't depict a wrestling match between Bigfoot and an alien. It was charcoal. What could possibly go wrong? Turns out everything. It arrived on a Tuesday, nestled amongst the usual junk mail and utility bills. A crisp, cream-colored envelope, heavier than it should have been, with the ominous, official-looking Sunnyside Estates HOA logo embossed at the top. My stomach did a little flip, a premonition of doom. I tore it open, dread coiling in my gut. "Dear Mr. Macklin Mac Peterson," it began, immediately formalizing the proceedings. "This letter serves as a formal notice of violation regarding your property located at 123 Maple Drive, Sunnyside Estates." I skimmed, my eyes darting. Violation? My heart hammered. Had I left my garage door open too long? Was my mailbox leaning a degree to the left? Then I saw it, in bold, unforgiving Times New Roman. Outdoor area rug, non-conforming color palette, and unapproved textile material. I read it again, and again. I even rubbed my eyes, thinking perhaps I was hallucinating. Non-conforming color palette? Unapproved textile. Material? My charcoal rug. My perfectly innocent, benign charcoal rug. The letter went on, detailing various infractions of Sections 7D, 7F, and 8A of the Community Aesthetic Guidelines. It cited potential for mildew accumulation, disruption of harmonious visual flow, and a general departure from the established residential ambience. It was signed in a spidery, precise hand by Brenda Higgins, President, Sunnyside Estates, Homeowners Association Board. Brenda. Of course. Brenda, whose own prize-winning petunias were, if you asked me, a touch too vibrant for harmonious visual flow. But who was I to judge? Apparently, I was no one. She, however, was everyone. My first reaction was pure, unadulterated disbelief, quickly followed by a sputtering, indignant laugh. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered to my empty living room, the letter shaking slightly in my hand. "My rug? The thing I got at Home Depot for $40? I strode out to the porch, grabbed the offending textile, and, in a moment of brilliant defiance, or utter idiocy, depending on your perspective, simply flipped it over. "There," I announced to the chirping birds and disapproving squirrels. "Now it's, darker charcoal. And the bottom is definitely approved textile material. It's like concrete colored now." I even recorded a quick video diary entry on my phone, narrating the ridiculousness. "Day 1 of the Great Rug War," I whispered into the camera, a smirk playing on my lips. "The enemy has made its first move, but I, Mac Peterson, am not easily defeated. My weapon? Passive-aggressive compliance. Stay tuned for updates, folks." I then nudged the rug about 2 inches to the left, just for good measure. "Perfect," I declared, feeling a surge of rebellious pride. Brenda Higgins clearly hadn't accounted for my unique brand of strategic stubbornness. This, I thought, was going to be easy. My smug satisfaction lasted precisely 3 days. On Friday, another cream-colored envelope landed in my mailbox. This one, however, felt heavier. Much heavier. I could almost hear the paper crackle with Brenda Higgins's righteous indignation. Inside, the tone had shifted from formal notice to outright hostile. "Dear Mr. Peterson," it read, devoid of any attempt at pleasantries. "Your attempts at superficial compliance regarding the aforementioned outdoor area rug are deemed unsatisfactory and insulting to the diligent efforts of the Sunnyside Estates HOA board." Insulting? My eyes widened. Superficial compliance? They saw through my darker charcoal ruse. These people were good, or more accurately, they were utterly insane. The letter continued, each sentence a fresh slap in the face. "Furthermore, the board has reviewed photographic evidence of your continued non-compliance, specifically referencing your deliberate repositioning of the prohibited item and what appears to be a video diary documenting your defiant actions, which a neighbor has kindly brought to our attention." A neighbor? I slammed the letter down. So much for my folk hero status. Someone was snitching. Probably Brenda herself, peeking through her Venetian blinds with a high-powered telescope. The final paragraph delivered the coup de grace. "Given your blatant disregard for established community guidelines, a fine of $150 in Hondollars has been levied against your property, effective immediately. Failure to remove the offending item and remit payment within 7 days will result in a further penalty of $50 per day and potential legal action, including but not limited to a lien placed upon your property." A lien? Over a rug? My blood began to boil. My little passive-aggressive nudges and flips weren't going to cut it anymore. They wanted a fight? Fine. They were going to get one. But it wouldn't be with passive aggression. It would be with a full-blown, in-your-face, utterly undeniable act of glorious, HOA-sanctioned defiance. I immediately called my best friend, Dave. Dave is the kind of guy who sees a challenge and immediately starts Googling how to build a trebuchet. "Dude, you will not believe this," I fumed, pacing my living room. "They fined me, $150 for the rug, and they mentioned my video diary. Someone ratted me out." Dave, bless his cynical heart, burst out laughing. "A video diary, Mac? You're killing me. But a lien over a rug? That's next level. What are you gonna do? Replace it with a giant inflatable gorilla? Don't give me ideas, I grumbled, but a mischievous grin was starting to spread across my face. No, the gorilla might violate the prohibition of oversized, non-permanent lawn ornaments clause. I need something permanent, something professional, something that looks expensive and totally legitimate, but is also absolutely ridiculous. I opened my laptop, pulling up various landscaping websites. Okay, brainstorming session, I announced. Option A, a koi pond, but they might say it's a safety hazard. Option B, a rock garden. Too zen, not enough stick-it-to-the-man vibe. Option C, a full-scale replica of Stonehenge, scaled down obviously, but then where do I put the tiny druids? You're spiraling, Mac, Dave chuckled. Think outside the box. What's something totally unexpected that could technically be considered an improvement, but would also be a colossal middle finger to Brenda? Then I saw it. An ad banner, flashing innocently on the side of a landscaping website. Transform your yard into a golfer's paradise. Professional Astroturf. Putting greens. My jaw dropped. The heavens parted. A chorus of angels, or perhaps just the neighborhood dogs barking, sang in my mind. Dave, I said, a slow, predatory grin spreading across my face. I've got it. What is it, you maniac? A professional Astroturf putting green. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. Then, Mac, you're a genius. That's perfect. The next day, my mission was clear. Find a contractor crazy enough to take on this project. I started with a few online searches and calls. Most of them were polite, but their voices grew increasingly hesitant as I explained the unique circumstances. So, you want to replace a small patch of grass, where there used to be an outdoor rug, because your HOA complained about the rug's color? One contractor asked, clearly struggling to process the information. Exactly, I chirped. And it needs to be professional grade, like PGA Tour quality. Right. Look, sir, we usually work on larger projects, and this sounds like a, neighborly dispute that we're probably not equipped to handle. Click. Another contractor, after listening to my entire saga, simply said, Sir, I think you need a lawyer, not a landscaper. Click. Just as I was beginning to despair, wondering if Brenda's reign of terror was truly unassailable, I found Big Tony's Turf and Terrain. Their website was gloriously amateurish, featuring a blurry photo of a burly man with a magnificent mustache, standing next to what appeared to be a slightly lopsided rock fountain. No job too big, no HOA too annoying, the tagline proudly proclaimed. This, I thought, was promising. I called the number. A gruff voice answered. Tony's Turf, what's your emergency? Not an emergency exactly, I began, but I have a rather unique landscaping project. Unique, huh? Try me. I've seen it all. Little old ladies wanting gnomes dressed like superheroes, guys wanting their whole yard paved to make a giant chessboard for human-sized pieces. What's your flavor of crazy? I took a deep breath. My HOA complained about my outdoor rug, so I want to replace the entire area where the rug was with a professional Astroturf putting green. There was a moment of silence. I braced myself for the click, but instead a deep, booming laugh erupted from the other end. Ha ha ha! A rug! Oh, I love it. That's a classic. So, they don't like your rug, huh? And you want to give them a full-blown short-game masterpiece? Mac, my friend, you just found your guy. I live for sticking it to those HOA busybodies. They tried to tell me my vintage garden decor wasn't up to code. My garden gnome, Bartholomew, was too provocative. Bartholomew! He's got a fishing rod, for crying out loud. When can I come take a look? Whenever you're free, Tony. I'm ready to make a statement. I'll be there in 20. This sounds like it's going to be fun. And that, dear reader, is how Big Tony, a man who clearly understood the true spirit of suburban warfare, entered my life. He showed up in a beat-up Ford F-150, its bed overflowing with tools, a giant roll of what looked like industrial-grade carpet, and a permanent grin. His handshake was like gripping a baseball mitt, and his eyes twinkled with a shared mischievousness. "All right, Mac," he said, surveying my tiny front yard, then my house, then squinting in the general direction of Brenda Higgins's immaculate property. "So the rug was here, eh? A fine, upstanding rug, I'm sure. And now you want a golf course." He grinned, then started making expansive gestures. "We're not just doing a patch, my friend. We're doing contours. We're doing a flag. We're doing a statement." "Exactly," I beamed. "PGA quality, Tony. The best of the best." "You got it. And don't worry about those busybodies. I got permits for everything. Noise ordinances? Pfft. My guys are pros. They'll be in and out like a whirlwind. By the time Brenda figures out what's happening, you'll have a miniature Augusta National right here on Maple Drive." I knew then, with absolute certainty, that I had found my champion. The rug war was about to get a whole lot greener, and a whole lot more entertaining. The morning of Operation Green Start dawned with the gentle hum of anticipation. Or perhaps that was just the sound of Big Tony's ancient, rumbling flatbed truck pulling up to my curb. I watched from my living room window, coffee in hand, as his crew spilled out. A surprisingly diverse group, including a burly man with a handlebar mustache named Gus, a surprisingly nimble woman named Maria, who handled heavy machinery like a ballet dancer, and a quiet, perpetually sunglasses-clad fellow I only ever heard referred to as Sparky. Their energy was infectious, a stark contrast to the usual hushed tones of Sunnyside estates. "All right, crew," Big Tony bellowed, his voice echoing slightly in the morning quiet. "You know the drill. This ain't just a putting green, folks. This is a monument, a testament to freedom of lawn expression." Gus gave a cheer. Maria revved the mini-excavator. Sparky simply adjusted his sunglasses and pointed to a spot on the lawn. They moved with an efficiency that belied Tony's eccentric pronouncements. The first step was the demolition, which in this case meant meticulously peeling back the small existing patch of grass where my innocent charcoal rug had once resided. The mini-excavator, a surprisingly loud beast, made short work of it, digging out a shallow depression that would form the base of my future golfing paradise. The earth mover roared, clanking and grinding, a glorious cacophony that, I suspected, was already sending tremors through the pristine, HOA-approved quiet of the neighborhood. I narrated the scene in my head, a mental play-by-play for my invisible audience. And here, folks, we see the beginnings of a revolution, a battle waged not with swords, but with Astroturf. Observe the sheer, unadulterated scale of this operation. For a patch of lawn no bigger than a generous walk-in closet, Big Tony has deployed enough heavy machinery to build a small airport. It's glorious. It's absolutely, delightfully, ridiculously over the top. My internal monologue was abruptly interrupted by a sound I had come to dread. The clipped, purposeful click-clack of sensible heels on pavement. My blood ran cold. I peered out from behind my curtains. There she was, striding across her own perfectly manicured lawn, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Brenda Higgins, in her full HOA presidential regalia, which today consisted of a precisely tailored pantsuit the color of a storm cloud. Her eyes, usually narrowed in suspicion, were now wide with a mixture of disbelief and outrage. "Macklin Peterson!" she called out, her voice cutting through the sounds of the machinery. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I sighed, took one last gulp of lukewarm coffee, and stepped out onto my porch, adopting my most innocent, congenial smile. "Brenda, good morning. Lovely day for some landscaping, wouldn't you say?" Big Tony, who had been supervising Gus with a laser level, turned around, a wide, knowing grin spreading across his face. "Morning, ma'am. Tony's Turf and Terrain at your service. Building dreams, one Astroturf square at a time." Brenda's gaze darted from the roaring mini-excavator to the giant roll of artificial grass leaning against Big Tony's truck, then finally landed on me, her expression a toxic cocktail of fury and condescension. "Mr. Peterson, what in the name of all that is reasonable do you think you are doing?" "Why, Brenda," I replied, feigning surprise. "I'm having a professional putting green installed. As per your lovely letters, my outdoor rug was non-conforming and unapproved. So I decided to replace it with something undeniably professional, something that will surely enhance the aesthetic value of Sunnyside Estates." I gestured expansively towards the nascent hole in my lawn. "A golfing amenity, if you will." Brenda's eyes bulged. "A golfing amenity? Mr. Peterson, this is a residential neighborhood. Furthermore, this noise is intolerable. You are violating Section 5C, excessive noise and disruption of community peace." Big Tony stepped forward, a twinkle in his eye. "Ma'am, with all due respect, my crews operate within all legal noise ordinances. We're licensed, bonded, and insured, and this is a construction zone. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few rules, I mean, eggs." He winked at me. But a putting green," Brenda sputtered, her usual composure cracking. "This is highly irregular. It's recreational. It's not a garden. It's not traditional landscaping." "Ah, but Brenda," I interjected, pulling out my phone. I'd highlighted the relevant section of the HOA bylaws last night. Section 7A, Approved Landscaping Enhancements, clearly states that improvements to property value, including professional-grade hardscaping and aesthetic installations, are encouraged, provided they do not infringe upon the common good or established safety protocols. And I quote, "A professional putting green, Brenda, is undeniably an aesthetic installation of the highest order. It's practically a luxury item. Think of the resale value." Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She fumbled with her clipboard, clearly, searching for a rule that fit. "But the green, it's artificial, and the size." "Artificial is the beauty of it, Brenda. Low water consumption, environmentally friendly, and the size? Perfectly proportioned for a challenging short game," I said, puffing out my chest. "I assure you, no part of this project infringes upon the common good. Unless, of course, you consider the common good to be a world utterly devoid of fun." Tony clapped me on the shoulder. "He's got you there, ma'am. He's followed the letter of the law. You asked for compliant, he's giving you compliant, with a side of awesome." Brenda shot us both a look that could curdle milk, then stalked back towards her house, her sensible heels now sounding less like a confident stride and more like the frantic retreat of a cornered animal. "She'll be back," Tony said knowingly. "But for now, advantage, Peterson." The next few days were a flurry of activity and increasingly absurd aesthetic decisions. Tony, with genuine relish, helped me design the most ridiculous, yet undeniably professional, putting green possible. We decided on a 3-hole design, complete with varying levels of elevation. "Needs character, Mac," Tony declared, surveying the now graded and compacted earth. "Not just flat green, needs undulation, needs drama." So we added a subtle but noticeable slope leading to the central hole. Then we deliberated on the hazards. "A sand trap, naturally," I declared. "But a small one, a polite sand trap." "Polite sand trap it is," Tony grinned. Gus meticulously carved out a tiny kidney bean-shaped depression, which Maria then filled with sparkling white silica sand. It looked utterly pristine, like a miniature desert oasis on my porch. "And what about a water feature?" I mused. "Something elegant." Tony squinted. "A full-blown pond might be pushing it, Mac. HOA might get safety hazard on that. But a bird bath? A decorative water feature." "Brilliant," I exclaimed. "But it needs a sign, something to really drive the point home." And so, a small, tastefully engraved wooden sign was placed beside the bird bath, reading, "Bunker's Oasis, Water Hazard." My narration for my mental audience was gleeful. Observe, folks, the meticulous attention to detail. This isn't just a bird bath. It's a strategically placed obstacle, designed to test the mettle of even the most seasoned miniature golfer. Then came the flag. Not just any flag, but a custom-made miniature flag, emblazoned with a single, elegant golf club and the words, "Sunnyside Estates, where the grass is always greener and sometimes artificial." Tony had it custom printed. He refused payment for it. "My contribution to the cause, Mac," he'd said, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. As the green turf was rolled out and meticulously seamed, my quiet little corner of Sunnyside Estates was transformed. The vibrant, almost unnaturally green surface was a stark contrast to the perfectly manicured, natural grass of my neighbors' lawns. It gleamed in the sunlight, an emerald jewel in a landscape of muted conformity. I started to notice a shift in the neighborhood. While Brenda and her ilk undoubtedly seethed, others seemed intrigued. I'd catch glimpses of neighbors, walking their dogs, slowing down as they passed my house, a faint smile playing on their lips. One afternoon, a young couple I barely knew paused at the end of my driveway. "That's quite something," the husband said, a nervous chuckle in his voice. "Yeah," his wife added, a sly grin forming. "Heard about the rug. Guess this is one way to, improve property values." She winked at me. Later that evening, after Tony and his crew had packed up for the day, I found a six-pack of craft beer nestled on my doormat, accompanied by a small, unsigned note that simply read, "Cheers to the Green Revolution." I grinned. It wasn't just my fight anymore. The seeds of rebellion, it seemed, were beginning to sprout, right there on my professional Astroturf putting green. The day the professional Astroturf putting green was finally complete was, in my estimation, nothing short of a public holiday. The final seams were invisible, the undulations perfect, the sand trap pristine, and the Bunker's Oasis bird bath sparkling in the morning sun. The custom flag, emblazoned with its cheeky motto, fluttered proudly from its miniature pole. It looked, quite frankly, astonishingly good, and utterly, gloriously out of place. "There you go, Mac," Big Tony announced, wiping his hands on his overalls, surveying his masterpiece with the proud air of an artist. "Your own little slice of Augusta. Hope Brenda likes golf." I stood there, a golf putter in hand that I'd bought specifically for this occasion, feeling like a conquering hero. "Tony, It's magnificent, truly, a testament to man's triumph over oppressive lawn decor regulations. To celebrate, I threw an impromptu grand opening. It consisted of myself, Big Tony, Gus, Maria, and Sparky, all taking turns attempting the first putts. Tony, surprisingly, was terrible. Gus kept getting his ball in the sand trap. Maria, with a natural golfer's eye, sank a hole-in-one on her second try, much to Sparky's quiet approval. The scene was boisterous, filled with laughter and the gentle clink of golf balls against the artificial turf. My narration for the day was particularly enthusiastic. And so the green stands, a beacon of hope for all those whose outdoor rugs have been unfairly maligned. Witness the joy, the camaraderie, the total disregard for what Brenda Higgins considers appropriate residential ambiance. Of course, the quiet of my victory was short-lived. By Wednesday, another cream-colored envelope graced my mailbox. This one, I noted, had an even thicker stack of supporting documentation. Brenda wasn't just angry. She was researching. "Dear Mr. Peterson," it began, devoid of any salutation this time, as if my name itself was an insult. "It has come to the attention of the Sunnyside Estates HOA Board that you have installed an unapproved recreational amenity on your property, specifically a putting green. This structure constitutes a sports facility, which is strictly regulated under Section 9G, Prohibition of Commercial or Large-Scale Recreational Enterprises, and Section 9H, Limitations on Private Recreational Facilities." I snorted. Commercial? Was I charging admission? Was there a caddy service I wasn't aware of? And large-scale recreational facilities? It was about the size of a king-sized bed. The letter went on, detailing how my putting green was a detriment to the residential character, a potential magnet for unauthorized guests, and a drain on the collective visual appeal of the community. Another $250 fine was slapped on, along with a demand for immediate removal. "Good grief," I muttered, reading the fine print. Brenda had really dug deep this time. They're really trying to make golf is a commercial enterprise stick, aren't they? I pulled out my phone and recorded another video diary entry, a sardonic smile on my face. "Day, lost count of the Great Rug War," I said, holding up the letter. "The enemy has resorted to calling golf a large-scale recreational enterprise. Next, they'll be telling me my mailbox is a communications hub for a rogue militia. Honestly, the lengths people will go to when they're bored." Then the doorbell rang. I answered, expecting a disgruntled neighbor, or perhaps a delivery. Instead, I was greeted by two police officers standing on my porch, looking a mixture of professional and utterly bewildered. One, a burly man with a neatly trimmed mustache, introduced himself as Officer Gregg. The other, younger and fidgety, was Officer Dale. "Mr. Macklin Peterson?" Officer Gregg asked, his voice surprisingly calm. "That's me, officer," I replied, trying to keep my voice even, though my heart was doing a frantic samba. "Is there a problem?" Officer Gregg nodded slowly, glancing at the putting green. "We received a complaint, multiple complaints actually, regarding a public nuisance, unlicensed business activity, and unapproved recreational facility at this address." He raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over my miniature golf course. "Is this the unapproved recreational facility?" "Indeed it is, officer," I said, adopting my most earnest, reasonable tone. "It's a professional Astroturf putting green." I had it installed last week." "Right," Officer Gregg said, trying to suppress a smile, then cleared his throat. "And are you running a commercial enterprise here, Mr. Peterson? Charging people to golf?" "Absolutely not, officer," I stated, pulling out the infamous HOA letters from my pocket. "This is for my personal enjoyment, and occasionally for friends and neighbors who appreciate a good short game. The Sunnyside Estates HOA, however, seems to believe that personal enjoyment is a commercial enterprise." I handed him the letters, starting with the original rug complaint, then the large-scale recreational facility missive. "You see, it all started with this," I explained, pointing to the non-conforming color palette line. Officer Gregg took the letters, his brow furrowed in concentration as he read through Brenda's increasingly absurd decrees. Officer Dale peered over his shoulder, a smirk growing on his face. "So they complained about your rug," Officer Gregg murmured, flipping to the second letter. "And you installed a putting green." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "That's a choice." "A highly compliant choice, officer," I corrected politely. "As per their bylaws, improvements to property value are encouraged, and a professional putting green, with its specialized Astroturf and custom flag, is surely an improvement. It's not like I installed a giant bouncy castle, which I imagine would be a violation of temporary structures or child magnet." Officer Gregg chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "I think you're right, Mr. Peterson. The letters here," he tapped the stack, "are quite something. We can't find anything actually illegal here. No public nuisance, no signs of commercial activity. Just a very green lawn." He looked at Officer Dale, who was now openly grinning. "Sir, are you obstructing traffic or anything?" Officer Dale asked, still smiling. "No, officer." "Disturbing the peace in a way that goes beyond normal residential noise?" "No, officer. Unless putting golf balls is now a felony." Officer Gregg handed back the letters. "Well, Mr. Peterson, we appreciate your cooperation. It seems like this is more of a neighborhood dispute than a police matter. I'd suggest the HOA maybe get a hobby, or take up golf." He gave me a knowing look. "Have a good day, sir." "You too, officers," I said, trying to hide my triumphant grin until they were safely back in their cruiser. They drove off, and I could have sworn I saw Officer Dale wiping tears of laughter from his eyes as they turned the corner. My victory felt sweet, but I knew Brenda wouldn't give up easily. And she didn't. The very next day, another fine arrived. This time, it wasn't about the green itself, but its usage. "Dear Mr. Peterson," the letter declared, "the Sunnyside Estates HOA Board has received numerous complaints regarding excessive lighting and noise pollution originating from your property after 8 p.m., specifically related to the use of your recreational amenity. This constitutes a violation of Section 5D, Community Quiet Hours, and Section 5E, Prohibition of Excessive Illumination. A fine of $100 has been levied." I read the letter and then looked out at my putting green. Excessive lighting? Noise pollution? I had simply strung up a few solar-powered fairy lights around the perimeter for a bit of ambiance during my evening practice putts. And the noise? It was the gentle tap-tap-tap of a golf ball and the occasional triumphant or frustrated shout. Apparently, even the sound of fun was now outlawed in Sunnyside Estates. But the letter gave me an idea. If they were going to complain about night games and noise, then night games and noise they would get. That evening, I invited a few more friends over. We set up even more solar lights, plus a few battery-powered lanterns. I bought glow-in-the-dark golf balls. We cranked up some extremely tasteful, but definitely audible, jazz music, and commenced a full-blown, glow-in-the-dark putting tournament. We laughed, we cheered, we occasionally stumbled over the bunker's oasis in the dark. It was glorious chaos. My mental commentary for the night was particularly cheeky. Observe, folks, the flagrant disregard for Brenda's community quiet hours. We are not just golfing, we are engaging in community building, a phrase conveniently found in the HOA's mission statement. The laughter, the music, the triumphant cries of "hole-in-one," all vital components of a thriving, vibrant community. If Brenda calls that noise pollution, then I'm guilty as charged. And frankly, I've never been happier to be a criminal. The next morning, sure enough, another fine appeared. This one for an additional $150, citing flagrant and deliberate violation of quiet hours and excessive illumination. My fines incurred tally was growing, but so was my resolve. This wasn't just about a rug or a putting green anymore. This was about the fundamental right to enjoy your own damn property, even if it meant irritating a self-appointed dictator with a clipboard. The war, it seemed, was escalating to its inevitable climatic conclusion. The summons arrived in a thick, registered envelope, demanding my presence at an emergency meeting of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association Board. It was couched in legalese so dense it could have been written in ancient Sumerian cuneiform. The meeting, it stated, was called to address repeated and egregious violations of community covenants and to make a final determination regarding the unapproved recreational facility on my property, as well as the accumulated fines. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a trial, a public execution of my putting green. I treated it with the gravity it deserved, which is to say, I spent the evening before prepping my defense with Big Tony and my friend Dave. We sat around my kitchen table, littered with empty pizza boxes and crumpled HOA bylaws, like a band of legal strategists. "All right, Mac," Dave said, taking a swig of beer. "They're gonna throw everything at you. Brenda's probably rehearsed her destruction of community values speech in front of a mirror 100 times. "Let her," I said, a steely glint in my eye. "I've got my own weapon, their own rulebook. Tony, what do you think they'll try next?" Big Tony, ever the pragmatist, pointed to a highlighted section. "They'll go for safety hazard, like someone's gonna trip on a golf ball and sue the HOA. And visual blight. Say it ruins the harmonious aesthetic of the neighborhood." "I'm ready for it," I declared, brandishing a red marker. My counter-argument for safety hazard. The green is professionally installed, level, and well lit. No more a hazard than a speed bump. And visual blight? I will argue that professional Astroturf is a low-maintenance, eco-friendly solution that enhances curb appeal. It's a unique landscaping feature, not a blight. It's art, Dave. Art! Dave snorted. "You're getting poetic, Mac. Just remember, Brenda understands bylaw better than art." "Exactly," I said, tapping the document. "And the bylaws are on my side. They encouraged improvements to property value. A professional putting green, custom designed, is an undeniable improvement. They can't just move the goalposts because they don't like the nature of my improvement." My mental narration for this prep session was intense. The War Council convenes. Tonight, we strategize. We dissect their draconian laws. We arm ourselves with logic, wit, and a healthy dose of pure, unadulterated stubbornness. For tomorrow, the fate of the putting green, and indeed the very soul of Sunnyside Estates, hangs in the balance. The next evening, as I walked towards the sterile, fluorescent-lit community room where the meeting was to be held, a strange mix of nerves and exhilaration buzzed through me. My friends, Dave, and a couple of other neighbors who had covertly shown support, waited outside, offering last-minute pep talks. "You got this, Mac," Dave whispered. "Just be calm, be reasonable, and make 'em look like the petty tyrants they are." I nodded, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door. The room was packed. Neighbors, some looking curious, others openly hostile, filled the folding chairs. At the front table sat the HOA board. Brenda Higgins, rigid and unsmiling in a severe navy blazer. Mr. Henderson, a perpetually nervous-looking man who usually just nodded whenever Brenda spoke, and Mrs. Rodriguez, a stern but quiet woman who actually seemed to listen. Brenda's eyes fixed on me the moment I entered, a triumphant, predatory glint in them. She had clearly been waiting for this moment. I took a seat in the front row, directly facing the board, trying to project an air of calm confidence. Brenda tapped her gavel. "Order, order! The emergency meeting of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association Board is now called to order." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the murmuring. "Tonight, we address a matter of grave importance to our community, a matter that threatens the very fabric of our harmonious living, the egregious and repeated violations committed by Mr. Macklin Peterson." She then launched into her opening statement, a verbose, dramatic monologue that painted me as a rogue agent, a harbinger of anarchy, and a man single-handedly bent on the destruction of property values and the erosion of our cherished community aesthetic. She spoke of the original rug, the deceptive compliance, the unlicensed commercial activity, the unapproved recreational amenity, and the flagrant disregard for quiet hours. Each accusation was delivered with theatrical flair, punctuated by frustrated glances at the putting green photos she projected onto a screen behind her. "This is not merely a putting green, ladies and gentlemen," Brenda declared, gesturing dramatically at the image. "This is a symbol of what happens when one individual believes they are above the rules, above the very covenants designed to protect all of us." She paused for dramatic effect, looking around the room for nods of agreement. A few heads bobbed. Most remained impassive. My mental commentary during her speech was a flurry of sarcastic rebuttals. "Oh, Brenda, honey, if a $40 rug and a miniature golf course are the symbols of anarchy, then I think our society has bigger problems. Also, unlicensed commercial activity? My only revenue stream is the occasional high five from Big Tony." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Brenda finished her impassioned and utterly ridiculous tirade. "Mr. Peterson," she announced, her voice dripping with condescension, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" I stood up, adjusting my shirt. "Thank you, Brenda," I began, my voice calm and measured. "Members of the board, neighbors." I paused, meeting Brenda's gaze squarely. "I do. First, let's address the destruction of property values claim. My putting green, installed by a licensed and insured professional contractor, Big Tony's Turf and Terrain, and yes, he's fantastic, is composed of high-grade, UV-resistant Astroturf. This is a permanent, professional landscape material. It requires virtually no water, no pesticides, and no mowing. In an era of increasing environmental consciousness, I would argue this is not a detriment, but a forward-thinking, eco-friendly improvement." I gestured to the relevant section of the bylaws. As per Section 7A, approved landscaping enhancements, improvements to property value are encouraged. Brenda scoffed. "It's artificial, Mr. Peterson. It's an eyesore." That's a matter of subjective taste, Brenda, I countered politely. Not an objective violation of a bylaw. Many high-end homes feature artificial turf. Are we to assume their property values are also in anarchy? I saw a few small smiles in the audience. Next, the unapproved recreational facility and commercial enterprise claims. As I previously informed the police officers who visited my property, this is a private putting green for personal use. I am not selling memberships. I am not charging fees. There is no unlicensed business activity. Is having a basketball hoop in a driveway a commercial enterprise, Mr. Henderson? Or a swimming pool a large-scale recreational facility if you invite your family over, Mrs. Rodriguez? Mr. Henderson squirmed, Mrs. Rodriguez remained impassive, but I detected a slight flicker in her eyes. As for public nuisance and excessive noise pollution after 8 p.m., I continued, I plead guilty to having fun. My solar lights are ambient, and the sound of golf balls tapping and friends laughing is, I believe, a sign of a vibrant, engaged community. In fact, Section 2B, Community Engagement Initiatives, encourages neighborly interaction and camaraderie. I paused. Unless, of course, the HOA believes that the only approved community engagement is silent, individual lawn mowing. Brenda's face was beet red. Mr. Peterson, you are deliberately misinterpreting our bylaws. You are making a mockery of this board. On the contrary, Brenda, I said, a slight edge entering my voice. I am adhering to the letter of your bylaws. If the bylaws are so easily misinterpreted, perhaps they need to be rewritten with more clarity, rather than selectively enforced against a $40 outdoor rug. The room was silent. You could feel the tension, thick as molasses. Brenda glared at me, her mouth a tight, angry line. The board will now deliberate and vote, she announced, her voice strained. She turned to Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Rodriguez. Mr. Henderson, your thoughts on Mr. Peterson's defense? Mr. Henderson mumbled something about rules being rules and community harmony, but it lacked conviction. Then Brenda turned to Mrs. Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had remained silent throughout the entire meeting, cleared her throat. Everyone leaned forward. I have read all the letters, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. And I have read the bylaws. Mr. Peterson, you are right. A professional landscape installation is an improvement, and while I may not personally find artificial grass to my taste, the bylaws do not prohibit it. Nor do they prohibit putting golf balls. The initial complaint about the outdoor rug was, frankly, a bit much. A gasp rippled through the room. Brenda's jaw dropped. I almost did a double take. Mrs. Rodriguez? My silent ally had revealed herself. Therefore, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, looking directly at Brenda, I move that the primary complaint regarding the putting green as an unapproved recreational facility be dismissed. However, she added, turning to me, the complaints about noise and excessive illumination after 8 p.m. are valid. Community quiet hours are a necessary covenant. Mr. Peterson, you were deliberately provocative there. I nodded. I accept that, Mrs. Rodriguez. Brenda, after recovering from her shock, tried to regain control. But the overall aesthetic, the precedent it sets. Precedent for what, Brenda? Mrs. Rodriguez asked calmly. For homeowners making creative, compliant improvements to their property? I believe that is a positive precedent. The vote was called. Mr. Henderson, under Brenda's furious glare, reluctantly voted against me. Brenda, of course, voted against me, but then Mrs. Rodriguez, with a calm, decisive nod, voted for me. The motion to remove the putting green was defeated. The green would stay. A collective sigh, a mix of relief and whispered excitement, filled the room. Brenda looked like someone had just stolen her entire petunia collection. However, Brenda ground out, her face a mask of barely controlled rage, the motion regarding the noise and illumination violations stands. Mr. Peterson, you will pay a reduced fine of $150 for those infractions, and any further violations will result in immediate and increased penalties. I smiled. Thank you, Brenda. I'll take that. It was a small price to pay for victory. The putting green was saved. The rug, in its ultimate evolution, had triumphed. Leaving the community room, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and euphoria. It was like I'd just run a marathon and won a Pulitzer Prize simultaneously. My friends, Dave, and the few other allies immediately swarmed me, pumping my hand and slapping me on the back. "You were brilliant, Mac," Dave exclaimed. "Brenda's face, priceless." "Mrs. Rodriguez, though." I still couldn't get over it. The quiet hero. Who knew she had it in her? Big Tony, who had been waiting outside, joined us, a cigar already lit and puffing. "Told you, Mac. No HOA's match for a determined homeowner and a good contractor. Congratulations, champ. My bill's in the mail, but this one was worth every penny." I paid the reduced fine the very next day. It felt like a symbolic tribute, a small fee for the right to existential lawn-based defiance. I also made sure to send a thank you card to Mrs. Rodriguez's, along with a small gift certificate to her favorite local bookstore. She had been the dark horse, the unexpected turning point, and a reminder that even within the most rigid structures, there can be sparks of independent thought. The putting green, once the center of intense debate, now stood as a permanent, vibrant fixture in my front yard. It was a monument, not just to a ridiculous argument about a rug, but to the idea that sometimes you just have to stand your ground, even if that ground is made of artificial turf. My mental commentary for these quieter, post-war days was much more relaxed. The dust has settled. The battle has been won. The green stands, a silent testament to the absurdity of micromanagement and the triumph of the human spirit, or at least one very stubborn human spirit. Life in Sunnyside Estates, of course, didn't immediately revert to a state of utopian harmony. Brenda Higgins, though defeated on the main point, was not one to entirely surrender. The new normal meant a steady trickle of increasingly ridiculous violation letters. First, one arrived about the non-conforming color of golf balls. Apparently, my neon pink and bright orange practice balls were a visual disruption. I promptly responded with a formal letter explaining that brightly colored golf balls were a safety feature, making them easier to spot and preventing potential hazards to children or pets. I attached a printout of an article from a golf magazine. Then, a week later, another letter. Complaint regarding a single, errant blade of natural grass observed protruding from the perimeter of your artificial turf installation, violating Section 3B, Maintenance of Lawn Edges. I actually laughed out loud when I read that one. A single blade of grass. I grabbed my tweezers, found the offending stalk, and ceremoniously plucked it out, then drafted an equally formal reply confirming the immediate remediation of the non-compliant botanical anomaly. My interactions with other neighbors changed, too. The whispered thanks and anonymous six-packs escalated. People would stop and chat, openly admiring the green, some even asking if they could try a putt. The putting green became a strange sort of community focal point, a subtle nod to collective rebellion against HOA overreach. I occasionally hosted casual, low-key putting gatherings, careful to keep the music down and turn off the glow-in-the-dark balls before 8 p.m. Brenda, I imagined, was watching with the binoculars, simmering in her tailored pantsuits. But now, she knew her limits. Looking back, the entire saga started with a simple, charcoal-colored outdoor rug. Who knew such a mundane item could spark such a glorious turf-based revolution? I learned that sometimes the most absurd battles are the ones worth fighting. I learned that bureaucracy, left unchecked, can grow into a tyrannical beast. And I learned that a good contractor with a healthy disrespect for petty rules is worth his weight in Astroturf. The process cost me some money, a lot of stress, and probably a few gray hairs. But it also gave me a story, a sense of accomplishment, and a truly magnificent professional Astroturf putting green right outside my door. It's a permanent fixture, a testament to what happens when an HOA complains about your outdoor rug. It might not be everyone's idea of a beautiful lawn, but it's my lawn, and it's perfectly, hilariously, wonderfully green. And sometimes, when the sun is setting and the Sunnyside estates are bathed in a peaceful golden glow, I walk out onto my green, select a putter, and carefully line up a shot. I take a deep breath, focusing on the ball, the hole, and the ridiculously long journey from a charcoal rug to this miniature golf course. I swing, the ball rolls, and with a satisfying clink, it drops into the hole. I raise my arms in a silent victory, a silent cheer to the silent battle. My name is Mac Peterson, and in Sunnyside Estates, my grass is always greener, and sometimes, delightfully, artificial.